UFC Saudi Arabia betting show. We have 11 fights this Saturday morning. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. First fight up on the card, and there is no other way that I'd like to get my Saturday morning started than with this heavyweight matchup between Hamdi, Abdelwahab making his return, minus 112, currently the slightest of favorites against Jamal Pogues at minus 108 on the comeback. And we'll start on the Hamdi Abdelwahab side. You guys know him because he fought Dontel Mays in his UFC debut. He took that fight on very short notice. At the time, he had only been fighting professionally around a year, so he was relatively new to MMA, and honestly, he kind of surprised everybody because despite the short notice nature, and part of it was Dontel Mays is Dontel Mays, so he did Dontel Mays things, and he got taken down. Hamdi hurt him at times on the feet as well. Hamdi wins the decision, but then gets popped for a banned substance, takes a 2-year suspension from USADA, and now he's making his return. So there's a couple variables here that add a little bit of variance to what is already a high variance division in the heavyweight division, but also some positives that I think you could take away from the Hamdi side. I mentioned he was still only a year into his professional MMA career. That 2-year layoff is a pretty big window of time for him to make some substantial improvements in his game, in his development in that layoff. Additionally, the cardio checked out in his UFC debut, even on short notice. Now, of course, there was some extra substance and assistance involved in that fight, but I'm not ready to say that he can't push a pace for 15 minutes just because presumably he won't have that additional substance for this fight. So there's a couple things, and then the other is that he comes from an Olympic level wrestling background. He was also the first Egyptian fighter signed in UFC history. You would think he would have the home crowd behind him here in Saudi Arabia. Now on the Pogue side, Pogues is a guy that's actually fought a similar matchup to this in his last fight when he won a decision over Thomas Peterson. Now, Pogues actually has a little bit of a wrestling background himself, but these days, he doesn't really rely on it. That was more so he previously fought at middleweight, light heavyweight. Now he's kind of ballooned up to heavyweight, and he actually moves pretty well for his size. He's got fast hands, not a ton of power, but he's got a good jab, good knees in the clinch, and overall pretty solid takedown defense. But that's surely to be tested in this matchup. And the worry with Pogues is that at times, you question whether or not he was training. I know based on his Instagram for this camp, it looks like he is taking it pretty seriously. But in the past, he's had issues kind of mentally where his head's at with some of the motivational stuff. He had that complete flop against Mick Parkin where he only landed 36 significant strikes over the course of 15 minutes. So there are some concerns on the Pogue side. The main concern for me is that when he was taken down against Thomas Peterson, he looked absolutely terrible. Kind of got saved by the bell there. If Peterson had more kind of urgency and heavier ground and pound potential, that fight could have been stopped because Pogues had no idea how to get up, just kind of covered up and shelled up. If he does that against Hamdi, who's very likely to be able to get in on those hips and be able to take him down, Hamdi could potentially finish him here. So the one positive that I'll say about Pogues, and the reason why I'm not just kind of mashing my chips in on the Hamdi side here, is because Pogues does seem to have lost at least a little bit of a weight. He talked about that after the Peterson fight, how he wanted to slim down a little bit, get his cardio in check, his diet and all that stuff. It does seem like he's, like I said, been training, slimmed down at least a little bit for this fight. So we could see the best version of Pogues potentially if he's able to keep this fight on the feet. But he's going to have to prove it to me. I think Hamdi gets the takedowns, and for that reason, at near a pick'em here, I got to take the Hamdi side. We'll say it's Hamdi by decision. That's the official pick. And next fight up, we have Lucas Alexander now, the small favorite at minus 120 with Bogden Grad on the comeback at plus 100. And we've seen a lot of line movement in favor of Lucas Alexander, and I got to say, I disagree. Bogden Grad was basically a minus 200 favorite about a week ago. Now you're getting plus 100, plus 106 is the best available at Bet Rivers using the Fight Numbers odds screen. And this is just a matchup that I think the market is just, I don't know what the deal is with this Lucas Alexander guy. Quite frankly, I don't think he's very good. He was a massive favorite against Jekka Seregi, got knocked out inside the first round, and now for some reason, we're just going right back to him. I think part of that is because Bogden Grad did not look super great against Michael Aswell, which was his return to the Contender Series. So he is making his UFC debut. I feel like people are kind of down on him due to that performance against a pretty solid boxer in Aswell. A lot of people thought Aswell arguably won that fight, and I think that's some of the recency bias here, because I can't see why the market just loves this Lucas Alexander guy. Like, I just don't get it. I don't think he's very good. He's an 8-4 prospect out of Brazil. Yeah, he's got some power. He also has significant grappling deficiencies. He's been submitted 3 times in his career. I don't fully trust the chin now, coming off a long layoff where he just got knocked out by Jackasaragi, like I mentioned. Bogden Grad is a very explosive fighter. He's a little bit undersized, but he is absolutely shredded. This is the same guy that fought Tom Nolan his first time on the Contender Series, and Nolan did catch him and knock him out. But he has that explosive type of power. Finishes by flying knees, spinning wheel kicks, a lot of really exciting things that I think the crowd will like. He also is dangerous in multiple areas. This guy has multiple submission victories. I think he could hurt Alexander on the feet, and I think if there's any type of grappling in this, I gotta favor Bogden Grad. Like I said, I disagree with the line movement here. I'm interested on the Grad side, and I'm interested in some potential unders or fight doesn't go as well, because I don't think this hits the judges' scorecards regardless of who wins. But we'll say it's Bogden Grad by TKO. That's the official pick. And next up, we have Jasmine Jasudavicius, a -225 favorite. The comeback on Mayra Bueno Silva is +185. And we'll start on the Jasudavicius side. She's currently on a 3-fight winning streak. And we know that Jasmine is just a dog, man. She is not the most skilled fighter, but she's got heart, she's got pace, and she's solid enough in multiple areas that that's going to take her pretty far in this division. And we've seen that really over the course of her career. She's somebody that has decent boxing. Yes, she can be tagged on the feet, but it's not because her defense is bad. It's more because she just relentlessly moves forward like a budget version of Merab. She's just constantly walking people down, moving forward, trying to get in the clinch where she's strong with those knees and elbows. She's also capable of landing takedowns, averages over 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. And I think that's what we can see here against Mayra Bueno Silva, who really is game as well on the feet, but she's usually a step behind. She swings hard, but she's very hittable on the feet. She can also be taken down as well. Her best asset is her submission grappling, but it's also like, if you take her down, you avoid the guillotine choke, most times you're pretty safe. And as we saw against Macy Chasson, she was able to open up some nasty cuts on Mayra Bueno Silva. Guess who's also very vicious with those elbows and ground and pound when she takes people down? It's Jasmine Jasudavicius. So don't rule out like a late stoppage here from Jasmine, somebody that's always hunting the finish. She is not looking to leave it up to the judges' scorecards. I still think that's probably the most likely way that this plays out, is a Jasmine decision. So that is going to be the official pick. But depending on what type of numbers we can get on round 2, round 3 TKO or something like that, I might be interested in some sprinkles there. But the official pick is going to be Jasmine by decision. And next up, we have Mike Davis, a -142 favorite with Fair ZM on the comeback at +120. And we've seen a lot of steam on the ZM side. This was actually an official fight numbers play from Pepe. He released it at +195. So certainly we've seen the market move in his favor. But I think this is going to be a really competitive matchup between two guys that I think are pretty well-rounded for the most part. Mike Davis, solid boxer on the feet, fast hands, and he's also very capable with that wrestling. We've seen him go to it time and time again. He can rack up those takedowns. His control isn't great, but, you know, very good at returning people to the mat, multiple takedowns. The issue with Mike Davis is that the weight cut has been a problem with him in the past. His body just kind of breaking down at times. Injuries have been a reoccurring theme with Mike Davis's career. And we know that because he pushes such a heavy pace in extended fights, he does tend to gas out, which is always a concern. Now, on the flip side, Fair ZM is somebody that is tough for me because, you know, very good striker, very technically sound, defensively sharp, comes from a high-level kickboxing background, but he's pretty one-dimensional as well. And in the past, we've seen him struggle with his defensive grappling. He was taken down and submitted by Terence McKinney. He's been taken down multiple times in the past as well. And then you'll see these performances from him where you're like, wow, he's really making improvements with his grappling. He's taking down, Michael Figlak. He's taken down Matt Frevola multiple times in his last fight. So it's just kind of hard to understand exactly where his level of wrestling and grappling is at, because he's so hot and cold with some of these performances, and obviously some of that is matchup based, but it just makes it difficult for me to really be confident in who's going to win some of those grappling and wrestling exchanges. In this fight, I do think it plays out very competitively, and I do think Mike Davis is going to win those wrestling exchanges, at least early in the fight while he's fresh. But again, that cardio concern is a real thing. If this is 1-1 going into the third, then I think you got to like ZM's chances. But I think for me, I'm going to edge so slightly on the Davis side, 29-28, something like that. I do think this hits the judges' scorecards at a high clip. We'll say it's Davis by decision. That's the official pick. And speaking of Terence McKinney, he's fighting on this card as well. He's a sizable favorite at -360 here. The comeback on Damir Hadzovic is +285. And I think it's very clear that the UFC is like, we know Terence McKinney's super exciting. He's in a bit of a lull recently. Let's try to get him a win, another exciting finish, build him back up. Who can we give him? Let's bring in Damir Hadzovic, turning 39 years old later this year, hasn't fought in 2.5 years. First fight post ACL surgery as well, and has never been able to defend takedowns. In fact, he's coming off a fight against Mark Diakiese where he was controlled for the entire fight. There was actually only 90 seconds in that fight where he wasn't technically being controlled by Mark Diakiese, who took him down 8 times in that fight. This guy has never been able to defend takedowns. He can be hurt on the feet. He can be out-grappled as well. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think McKinney can bomb him on the feet or just take the easy path of least resistance, take him down, out-grapple him, and find a finish on the mat as well. We'll say it's McKinney by TKO. That's the official pick. And next up, we have Shamil Gaziev, a -345 favorite. The comeback on Thomas Peterson is +275. And this is one where I got to have some interest in the underdog here. We'll start on the Gaziev side. This guy's being propped up as a big favorite. He's coming off a win over Dontel Mays, which, let's be honest, we talked about Mays earlier. That's not super impressive. Mays kind of gifted him the takedowns, so he wasn't able to expose where I think the liabilities are with a guy like Shamil Gaziev. Gaziev, most of his wins have come by knockout. Most of them have come early. He definitely has a grappling base, and he's power based, but we see it time and time again with a lot of these round one early finishing merchants is that they can't fight outside of that first round, and he's already been exposed. You look at that fight against Jairzinho Rosenstruck where he had to fight in a main event, which was crazy that they would book him for a main event against an experienced heavyweight like that, because outside of an early finish, he was always going to gas out in that fight. And even in a third round fight, I think that's the case here with Shamil Gaziev, because he just doesn't have the gas tanks to sustain any type of pace for 15 minutes unless he's just gifted a takedown and he's able to lay on you for those rounds. And I don't think that's going to be the case here, at least not to the extent that the market is pricing this at, because Thomas Peterson not only is coming off an underdog win his last time out against Muhammad Usman, that was a big play for Fight Number subscribers as well. And I got to go back to the well here with Peterson. He has a lot of attributes that I still like, particularly in a matchup like this. He's got solid cardio for the heavyweight division. He typically, is moving forward, landing volume, doesn't have a ton of power on the feet, but he's also got a solid wrestling background himself. I believe he was a junior college national champion or something along the lines. I know he has wrestling accolades, and we even saw that against Usman. He's got a really solid single leg as well, and I don't think he's very easy to take down. So if you tell me Gaziev is not going to get easy takedowns, and especially outside of the first round, there's also potential Peterson could land takedowns. We've yet to see Gaziev on his back. I suspect it's not very good, especially the more tired that he gets. He could kind of just quit. If Peterson takes him down, especially outside of the first round, I could see Gaziev just melting and Peterson getting the finish. Peterson's somebody that actually has pretty decent submissions. This guy's got multiple submission victories over an LFA and on the regional scene. I just think there's a lot of reasons you can like a guy like Peterson in a matchup like this. You just need him to survive that early blitz of Gaziev where he does have big power, he can hurt you, and he can finish you early. So outside of that happening, I think Peterson's going to take over. He's a live dog here anywhere at current prices, plus 300 range, whatever it's at. I think it's a great bet. We're going Peterson by submission. That's the official pick. And up next, we have Muhammad Naimov, a minus 298 favorite. The comeback on Khan O'Flea is plus 240. And this is one I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because I really don't rate either of these guys very highly. I think Naimov has been super fortunate for his UFC run. I've talked about that in the past. We finally saw someone get him. It was Felipe Lima, submitted him in the third round his last time out. And Naimov is somebody that's just kind of solid everywhere. Like, he can hurt you on the feet, but he can also be low volume at times. He can also be taken down at times. But usually you only see that against the better people that he's fighting. You don't really see it against these lower level guys like an Khan O'Flea, because O'Flea is just somebody I'm not really sure belongs at the UFC level. He's 11-3 prospect fighting out of Australia. He's got a bunch of submission wins, and he was knocked out by Moran Santos in his UFC debut in his last time out. So this is one where I think Naimov is just a little bit better. I think he can counter O'Flea and potentially hurt him on the feet. I think he could also maybe land a takedown or two as well, because O'Flea doesn't have great takedown defense. So it's just one that I think they're giving Naimov, who should have the crowd behind him, a solid bounce back opportunity, and I expect him to get his hand raised. We'll say it's Naimov by decision. That's the official pick. And up next, we have Saeed Nurmagomedov, a minus 175 favorite. The comeback on Vinicius Oliveira is plus 145. And Saeed Nurmagomedov has won 5 of his last 6 fights now. He's coming off a sizable layoff, but he's a very solid fighter. I think at times I probably didn't give him enough respect relative to the rest of kind of the Nurmagomedov clan, but he's very well-rounded. His striking is solid. He's got sharp leg kicks, and obviously we know one of his best assets is his submission grappling. He's very slick with his submission attempts, and he could potentially submit anybody in this division if you get sloppy and give him the neck. So this is one where Vinicius is going to mind his P's and Q's if he gets in close, but I think on the feet, Oliveira is going to have a clear power advantage. I think he's just as fast as Nurmagomedov, if not faster on the feet. And I also would think that he'd have a cardio edge. This is a guy that's put together a very impressive short UFC tenure here, coming off the Contender Series, very exciting style, ton of wins by knockout, but he's also been knocked out multiple times, which is a concern because he is so reckless with the flying knees and the spinning attempts. He's trying to take your head off. He just disregards his defense at times. But I mentioned what he's done in the UFC so far. He had the knockout of the year against Bernardo Sapai in his UFC debut, and then he follows that up with a very solid win against Ricky Simon, who wasn't really able to take him down and control him at all. So if Nurmagomedov's unable to have a ton of grappling success here outside of an early submission, then I think this gets pretty dicey on the feet, especially as the fight gets extended, where I think Oliveira potentially has better cardio and could land the bigger shots as well. So I'm going to side with the dog here. We'll say it's Oliveira by decision. That's the official pick. And next up, we have another heavyweight clash between Sergey Pavlovich, a minus 305 favorite, with Jairzinho Rozenstruik on the comeback at plus 245. And this is a really fun, exciting matchup. I know sometimes you see heavyweight matchups and you're like, well, this could potentially turn into a stinker if they both respect each other's power, etc., etc. That's always possible, but I don't think that's the case with the way that these two match up, because Sergey Pavlovich is now on a 2-fight losing streak. He needs to get back in the win column. I think he goes back to the basics here. That's moving forward and trying to take your head off. 15 of his 18 wins have come by knockout. The majority of those have come inside the first round. Now, on the flip side, Jairzinho Rozenstruik is a very good counter striker. That is his base. He's a very good boxer, and he loves to counter his opponents. So if Pavlovich starts to overextend, Jairzinho could potentially catch him as well. So I don't think this is going to be a stinker here. I think ultimately somebody's going to get floored here and knocked out. I'm going to side with Pavlovich because I just respect that power. It is, it cannot be overstated. But I also think that Jairzinho Rozenstruik, if he's able to survive the first even 2-3 minutes of the fight, then it's like, okay, now I'm looking to get in live on Jairzinho Struck and hope that this fight gets extended, because that's where I would favor him in rounds 2 and round 3. So the official pick is going to be Pavlovich by TKO, but this is one I definitely have some interest in, really multiple angles. A Pavlovich KO1 depending on the number, and then maybe getting involved in a Rosenstruck KO 2-3 or Rosenstruck live as well. That's the way I see this fight playing out, but in terms of the official pick, it's going to be Pavlovich by knockout. Which brings us to our co-main event, as Magomedov is a -185 favorite. The comeback on Michael Venom Paige is +154. And we have Paige coming off that decision loss against Ian Gary. He's now moving up a weight class here, and I think that's notable against Magomedov, who's fighting, with the home crowd behind him in the co-main event spot. So it's no secret who they're trying to build up here. And I think this should be pretty competitive, just in the sense that both guys are strikers, neither guy's looking to grapple, neither guy's a very good grappler, and I think they both want to keep it on the feet. So this is really going to come down to the volume and the bigger shots, and I think that's probably going to be on the Magomedov side. Very technical striker, 15-0 undefeated prospect, 4-0 in the UFC, and we've seen he's got power, he's got leg kicks that he's looking to blast away while the fight plays out at range. And Michael Venom Paige, that wide stance, yes, he's quick, he's got good footwork, but I think the kicks of Magomedov is going to be the difference in what should be a competitive but clear decision win. So we're going to say it's Magomedov by decision. That's the official pick. And next up is our main event. We have Israel Adesanya, a -155 favorite, with Nasruddin Imavov on the comeback at +130. And initially, I thought I'd have some interest here in Imavov, a couple weeks ago when I started to kind of think about this matchup a little bit. And the more I dug into it, I actually prefer the Izzy side. And for a couple reasons. For starters, I think Israel Adesanya is the better striker. I don't think many people are going to dispute that. He's also going to be working with a 5-inch reach advantage, which I think could play a factor here. I think Imavov, if he's going to win this fight, he probably needs to have some grappling success. And I'm just not super confident that I see that happening here. And if it does, can he do that over the course of 25 minutes? This is a guy that we've seen at times his cardio look a little bit spotty. And I know people will point to Izzy's last fight against Dricus du Plessis, where he gassed out in that fight. But over the course of his career, that was really the only time that we saw, a cardio really be a problem for Izzy. I respect the course of his career more than I do that one fight. So I think I trust the gas tank of Adesanya more. I trust his ability to keep the fight at space, at range, where I think he will have the advantage over Imavov, a guy that at times might need to get in the clinch, make it a little bit dirty, really just bully Izzy up along the fence at times. He might be able to do that. I just question whether he's going to be able to do that enough over the course of 5 rounds, enough to win those rounds, because I think Izzy's going to be landing the cleaner shots on the feet. I think Izzy potentially could be landing more volume as well. And then I mentioned the gas tank as well, which I slightly favor Izzy. So there's some concerns, but most of it is on the mental side with Israel Adesanya. A guy that this is going to be his first, I believe, his first non-title fight since 2019. So there's definitely some room to wonder kind of where his head's at with a matchup like this. But I think in terms of the skill set, I think I got to side with the small favorite here in Israel Adesanya. We'll say it's Adesanya by decision. That's the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have everything you need if you're betting on fights this weekend. I appreciate you watching. Best of luck. We'll see you guys next week.